In this video, I'll go over apoptosis, necrosis, and inflammation. So apoptosis on the right side of the board here and necrosis are both potential ways a cell can die. So apoptosis on the right side of the board here, again, is Greek for dropping off, and that is the correct and beneficial way for a cell to die. In this process, the proteins are broken down to their amino acids. The DNA is broken down into their nucleic acids. And these organelles, which are found inside the cell, they are released into other cells in the environment intact. And again, the proteins are broken down to amino acids, and they are able to be used by other cells. And the DNA is broken down to nucleic acids, and they are also able to be used by other cells in the area, as well, again, as the organelles, which are released intact. These organelles are compartments found inside the cell, and in many cases, the environment inside these organelles would be toxic to the cell if they weren't contained. So having the cell release organelles in their entirety is significant in helping prevent the cell dying from causing damage to the neighboring environment. So that's apoptosis. That's the correct and beneficial way for a cell to die. The other alternative, or another alternative, is necrosis. Now, necrosis is Greek for death. And in this process, this cell basically just swells up and bursts. It lyses, including the organelles. The organelles also lyse or burst, leaching all their internal fluid and components into the neighboring tissue. Now, as a consequence, it causes inflammation. So here, the cell disintegrates. And again, all the tissue in the surrounding area are negatively impacted because the components of the cell are not broken down correctly. The organelles lyse and dump all their internal fluid into the neighboring environment. And that causes an inflammatory response. Okay, so causes of necrosis can include physical injury, dramatic temperature changes, malnourishment, nerve damage to the tissue, bacterial toxins, a buildup of nitric oxide or free radicals, in this case reactive oxygen species, depletion, severe depletion in oxygen and glucose, viruses, and also an incorrect release of pancreatic enzymes are all liable for cells to enter this necrotic condition. Now let's look at the inflammatory response really quickly. So again, cells that die through necrosis, again, create an inflammatory response. So when a cell bursts, it releases a chemical called C5a, and that is a peptide. And that peptide actually creates a condition called chemotaxis, where it attracts certain other chemicals to the area to help clean up the mess, so to speak. Okay, so on the left side of the board here, I have just the three major events that happen in inflammation. First off, we have an increased blood flow to the area that is inflamed. Second, we have an increase in permeability to those blood vessels in the surrounding area, which allows larger molecules to pass into the tissue. In this case, ideally, it would be these immune mediators. So these immune mediators are really first on the scene after the blood vessels increase their permeability to help remediate the area. Finally, with the help of this chemical C5a, it attracts these actual individual cells from the blood vessels to migrate into the tissue to help clean up the mess here. And these first on the scene are leukocytes. Here I have highlighted here. And again, these are actually whole immune cells, followed by monocytes and finally lymphocytes. So those are the three hallmarks of inflammation: increased blood flow to the area, increased permeability in the blood vessels to the area, which allow larger molecules such as immune mediators to pass through. Finally, we actually have a complete immune response in that we have leukocytes, monocytes, and lymphocytes drawn to the inflamed area. So I'll leave all my sources and anything I mentioned on the board, anything I mentioned in the video that is not on the board, I'll leave in the description box as well. And I'm also going to leave a little bit more information on apoptosis.